You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. And I've learned to be more vocal about those limitations. In general, when you slow down and you live your life with intention and awareness, that suddenly you become a much better advocate for yourself, or change things that are really not working for you. And you can create the exact energy and bandwidth that you need so that you are as capable as possible. And you know what? When you have to do things that you're just running at half full, you give yourself grace because it is not the end of the world. Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia, and every week I come here to share a little bit of what's been going on in my heart or along the journey, lessons that I'm learning, takeaways, and things that I'm thinking about with the hopes that if I share what I've been going through, maybe it'll help somebody out there, maybe somebody like you, even if it's with just something that you had never thought of that way before, or perhaps just something to laugh about, or to be your friend on that car drive home or while you're cleaning your house. I know that is so often when I'm listening to podcasts myself is when I'm either driving, cleaning, or working because I also run a photography business. And so a lot of time when I'm working on editing and things like that, I just love to listen to a podcast. So that's what we are doing here today. Today, we're going to be talking all about knowing your limits. And I think this is such a relevant conversation for all of us, whether you're in a relationship or you are a parent or you run a business or you work a job. Life is filled with opportunities for us to push ourselves past what we're really capable of from moment to moment. And especially in this busy world that we live in, it is so easy to feel like if we are not pushing past our limit 100% of the time, then we are not giving enough. It's like there are very good things about pushing yourself and going for what you want and helping other people, but we've also kind of conditioned ourselves to constantly be running in a deficit, to constantly be pushing past ourselves and pushing into burnout. And we know that that's not working. We know it's not sustainable. And yet we do it anyway. And then we live half of our life trying to get out of these deep modes where we are just beyond what we're capable of. We're exhausted. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more on how to recognize that in yourself, how to set limits, and how to hold space for yourself. Like, what does the space in between actually look like? But first, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening astrologically with our astro check-in. And this week, we actually have a lot to think about because we are kicking off eclipse season this weekend with this solar eclipse in Taurus. A solar eclipse always happens during a new moon. And so we've got a new moon this weekend. We've got the start of eclipse season, and we've got our first eclipse of the year, all happening in Taurus. So what does this mean? How is this going to affect you? Well, the first thing that I like to think about when you're kind of integrating astrological tenets into your self-care practice or like how to use it in your life, I always like to think about what is the zodiac sign that this is happening in. And this is happening in the sign of Taurus. Now you can kind of go through that Rolodex in your mind, like who are your Taurus friends? What are they like? Do you know a Taurus? Maybe you are a Taurus. I actually have a huge handful of friends who are Tauruses. So if you're listening to this, first of all, I'm saying happy birthday to you because it is Taurus season right now. We've got so many Taurus birthdays happening right now. But what's important to know about Taurus? Taurus is an earth sign. It is a fixed earth signs. So Tauruses have a reputation for kind of being like that bull. They are known for being very stubborn. And that's because they are so incredibly hardworking. Taurus, as an earth element, is very much known for digging your heels in, for getting things done, for being super solid and super dependable. And then Taurus also has this other side that is perfect when it comes to sensuality. And I'm talking about anything that really feeds your senses. So think of like delicious tasting food or smells that just are to die for. Soft blankets, luxury, right? Like there is a reason that luxury and sensuality go together, because oftentimes things that are very luxurious are actually things that really appeal to our senses. So this is also a very good time to really start thinking about what can you be doing right now that appeals to your senses? How can you feed your senses right now? How can you slow down, be a little bit more in the moment? And that's another thing that is important to note about Taurus, is that I always like to say it is definitely steady, very hardworking, but it is slow and steady. So whenever you're trying to incorporate or celebrate with more Taurus energy in your life, one of the first things you can do is just slow things down. Take a good look at your calendar. Is there stuff that is starting to get to be too much? This kind of goes into our limitations talk that will be happening later too, but it all works together. It's relevant right now. Are there things on your schedule that can be rearranged? Are there things that you're expecting out of yourself right now that you don't have the capacity for? And one of the reasons I think this is an important time to look at this during this Taurus season is because if you want to show up really excellently and fully as yourself, can you really do that as you give yourself to so many different things and so many different projects? Probably more than likely, you're showing up as less than your full self. So the more you take off your plate, the more fully you can show up for what you are actually showing up for. This is a really beautiful time during this earthy season to look at that. Now, that's kind of an overview of Taurus, and you can think about all of these different themes as we think about this new moon that is happening this weekend. New moons are a wonderful time. Each new moon happens every 28 days for setting new intentions, for opening new chapters, for making new beginnings happen. And so what does that look like in Taurus? Well, in Taurus, this is a beautiful time to help things to grow, to really plant seeds. Sure, like metaphorical seeds, but also like literal seeds. What do you want to plant right now? Because it is planting season, right? You can start actual seedlings this weekend. You can work with the earth. You can get out into the dirt. You can connect with Mother Earth that way. This is a beautiful time to do it. And honestly, Earth Day comes right after Taurus season kicks off. That's for a reason, I believe. And so all of these ways that you can celebrate the earth right now and do things that connect you to nature, this is a perfect time for that. Now, as we start to think of this new moon with the eclipse element to it, this is where it changes just a little bit. I've always heard it said that when it comes to eclipses, this is not a really great time to manifest, because what happens during an eclipse is that one of the eclipses happen between, it's a kind of a conversation between the sun, the moon, and the earth. And what's happening during a solar eclipse is that the earth is actually going to be moving between the sun and the moon, which are in line with each other, which kind of creates that effect where you see the sun get blocked out by the earth, and you notice that shadow passing over it. And then, of course, the same thing kind of happens during a lunar eclipse. It just happens in a different way, where we see that shadow actually pass over the surface of the moon when the earth comes again between the sun and the moon, but this time they're opposing each other. So that's why we see it on the moon side, the lunar eclipse. So there's a few things that I want you to keep in mind during eclipse season. One, eclipses turn a new moon or a full moon, like the energy of that, up by like 20. So this is going to be an incredibly powerful new moon. Now, before you go and you're like, okay, perfect, I'm going to take this time to manifest, I'm going to set all these intentions and I'm going to get really wild about this. the cool and kind of some people think is like maybe a little, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like scary about an eclipse is that they bring major change and they bring into your life things that you don't expect or that you can't see coming, because it's kind of like the idea of an eclipse. If you had no idea scientifically what was happening during an eclipse, you would think, oh my gosh, is the world ending right now? Like literally, what is happening to our sun? What is happening to the moon? And so it's something that can be very life altering, and usually big major changes historically in our world have happened around eclipses. So I really believe that the best thing that you can do during an eclipse is, instead of using your normal manifestation or intention setting practices, is to kind of just put your observing glasses on. And you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to push. You don't have to force your outcomes. You don't have to write down all your goals and do your normal way of moving things forward. It's almost like you are having this unspoken conversation with the universe saying, like, I know what I want. I know what I've been working on. And now I'm going to just sit here and I'm going to wait and see what is happening. I'm going to watch for the reality that I'm dealing with. And, big things, you might already be feeling this. You might already be feeling like big shakeups are happening in your life. I actually know with a lot of people like in my inner circle right now, like big things are happening. Like people are changing jobs. People are getting engaged. People are crossing over to the other side. Like things are happening in the world. And that's definitely to be expected with an eclipse, or any. Well, honestly, all of these things happen all the time, but they especially are going to be happening during eclipse season, because it's almost as though one door is closing and another one is opening. And you can think of that with eclipses in general, because eclipses come in pairs. So they're going to be happening right now, this eclipse season, along this Taurus and Scorpio axis. So right now we're going to have the new moon in Taurus, and then next full moon in Scorpio, we're going to have a solar eclipse. And then later this fall, when we get into Scorpio season, we're going to be doing this whole thing again. We're going to have a solar eclipse in Scorpio, and then we're going to have a lunar eclipse when the full moon's in Taurus. So this is going to be the theme of this year. And we are in this eclipse season along Taurus and Scorpio. We can think about water and earth. We can think about the slower, more yin energies of these signs. We can think about how to balance between being soft and sensitive and being powerful and transformational. We can also think about the differences between Taurus and Scorpio, which I'll go over closer to the full moon, since we're going to be dealing more with that polarity then. But regardless, like I said, these things come in pairs. So they come in pairs, are going to happen over this next 2 weeks. And everything with eclipses kind of resents this ebbing and flowing, right? So as we open one door, another door closes. I know I already said that, but just to go back to that example, again, if we're gaining something, then we're also maybe losing something else. Or if we lose something, then we gain something. If we are rejoicing over something, maybe we're weeping over something. And as anything in life, these things don't just happen immediately all at once, right? So it's not just the short game, it's the long game. The things that are going on in your life right now, there's going to be another side of a coin that might come to pass during, October, November's eclipse season, or maybe this time next year. So that's just something to keep in mind right now, that change is happening in our life. It might be happening around finances. It might be happening around things that you own, things that you've been cultivating, things you've been working on. It might have to do with inheritance, or desiring things, having things, or do you have what you desire? Are you working towards those things? So these are themes at play right now. And I'll wrap that up there, but I'll just say as a final kind of end to this little segment is that if this is really interesting to you and you want more information, check out the self-care guide that I'm going to be putting together specifically for this unique eclipse season, Taurus new moon over the next month ahead. It's going to have a ton of information in there that will help talk about this a little bit more succinctly, less train of thought, since I'll be writing it instead of speaking to you about it. It'll have some rituals that you can incorporate that will help support you over the next couple weeks and just give you a little bit more of a deep dive. That'll be available on my website starting this weekend. And if you are a member of the Patreon, you can have it delivered right to your inbox. Just a little reminder there. I do have an option that's just for podcast listeners, so you can help support me a bit from within. With $3 a month will get you ad-free episodes of every episode of the podcast, as well as that self-care guide delivered to your inbox each and every month. So if you're interested in that, check it out, patreon.com/abitfromwithin. My Patreon members, you really do help me be able to do this work that I love, and I appreciate you so much. And there are other levels too, because we do yoga and meditation and all kinds of cool things. So if you're interested in any of that, check that out. Let's take a quick break here, and then let's dive into this conversation around knowing our limits. Welcome back. So part of what got me thinking about this weekend is that I had a wedding on Saturday. It was a wonderful wedding. It was kind of a crazy day because in Colorado, we've been having such crazy windstorms. And at first the wind was so intense that I was a little worried that we were going to have to move a lot of the wedding indoors. And I was kind of stressing out about, how is I going to take care of all these beautiful ladies and their like beautiful hair? That's like the thing I stress out about most when it comes to photography, because the last thing you'd want is a picture of, your family and, your mom's bangs are sticking straight up in the air or something like that. Or as a bride to like have invested in like the ultimate hairstyle that you're just so excited to have for your wedding day, only to have it ruined by the wind, right? So that already kind of added this crazy element to the day. But luckily, in true Colorado fashion, one thing I always tell my brides is, in Colorado, the thing that's always going for us is that everything always changes. So what you think you're dealing with one minute, it usually just passes by. And that happened at this wedding. We were able to have everything outside still. It was a gorgeous sunny day still. It was warm. We were able to get all of their couples portraits done outdoors. And that is so special, especially for April. And I will say, this couple had actually gotten legally married, and I was able to photograph their marriage ceremony. And the day that we did that, it was below freezing. It was in February, and it was so cold, and it was still perfect. So we were all just kind of laughing about how, I guess it's just sometimes the extremes of the Colorado weather that we're going to be dealing with. But so I had that wedding on Saturday, and then yesterday, I had all of these plans, weekend plans, things that you think you're going to be able to get done. And I got through some of it. I have been mentioning, if you've been listening for a little while, that I've been talking about cleaning my closet. One, as kind of a self-care practice that I'm always recommending, because I do think that like taking care of those areas in your life that are so easy to neglect, that those are actually really great ways to show yourself self-care. And so it's been on my mind. I wanted to get into this closet and just clean it out. And I say this closet because I'm literally recording in my closet right now. My closet is also my podcast recording studio. And so I ended up on Sunday taking a couple hours and, going through all my clothes, getting rid of stuff that either doesn't fit anymore or stuff that is so old. I mean, I had some items that I'm choosing to donate that I'm like, I've literally had this for like 10 years now. And I hardly wore it when I, just bought it, and I'm really not wearing it now, and I'm ready to let it go. So went through all of my clothes, went through all of our shelves, reorganized all the shoes. And then I don't know if you guys do this like I do, is like I collect boxes for some of our more important things. Like maybe it's like some of the photography equipment we have, or Dave built his own computer. And so we've got like a box for like the processor and a box for the RAM and like all of these individual components. And I just keep them because at first it's kind of like a warranty thing. And then sometimes stuff has serial numbers on it. And then some stuff is just things that, like our ceiling fan, like I have the box for our ceiling fan. And I guess I've just kept it thinking like, okay, as a homeowner, in case, I don't know, there's like extra pieces in there, or if we need to switch it out, we know anyway. So you get the picture. And I feel like this collection has been growing as we've been living here. And it's been driving me crazy just in the back of my mind that we have boxes that we just really don't need anymore. And so I went through all of those boxes and got rid of them and reorganized everything. And then, yeah, I'll say I know that I'm a type A personality, and I also am a Virgo rising. So I've got this piece in me that loves to organize and perfect things like that. So it's definitely something that is very intuitive for my own self-care practice, because I feel so good once I get that all done. But I will also say that doing that kind of stuff is mentally exhausting, whether you love doing it or you hate doing it. It takes a lot of mental work. And so after I finished doing that, we went and spent a couple hours with my folks. And by the time I got back, I was so tired. And I don't know how to say this in a way that makes sense, other than like tired is not really a normal state of being for me. I'm kind of just always going. I'm like a generator, right? I'm just like go until finally, eventually I become unconscious. I sleep and then I wake up and I just do it all over again. And so as we were driving home from my parents' house, even Dave, he was trying to talk to me about things, and I couldn't even respond to him. I was exhausted. And he's like, are you mad at me? Are you like, what's going on with you? Are you okay? Like we went from all of the directions, from like him thinking I was trying to start a fight with him to like him just being worried about me. And I just tried to tell him, I'm like, I'm literally just so tired right now. I'm just so tired. And when I thought I'm going to make dinner, and then I'm just going to finish watching Bridgerton. That's like my goal for the day. I know we all need a day where we can just have a day off. I was like, I'm going to make dinner and then I'm going to watch Bridgerton. I'm going to finish Bridgerton. And so as I was doing that, and an hour went by, I started to feel, oh my gosh, I need to get this done for tomorrow. And I need to get, I have this call going on, and I've got this family thing I need to do. And oh gosh, it's the solar eclipse this week. I need to get the new moon guide done. And okay, what am I going to talk about in the podcast? My mind starts to spiral. And I think this is a normal thing for a lot of us out there, where we start to go down the rabbit hole of the to-do list. One thing leads to another thing. And then before you know it, you feel so overwhelmed with all of these things that you have to do. And for a lot of us, it's not even just the knowing that we have to do it. I mean, that's one piece of it. But the second piece of it is the mental responsibility that it's all on you, that there's all of these things that you have to figure out. And that's kind of what I was feeling last night, was like, I am so tired right now. How the heck am I going to get all of this stuff done? And how am I going to get it all done tomorrow? Because Mondays are kind of like my sacred day to just work on the podcast and the blog and all the things that I'm working on and the ways I want to help people with self-love and self-care. And when I have got other things going on, whether it's for the family or whether it's for the photography business, suddenly I'm put in a position where I have to juggle a lot of 2 worlds or sometimes 3 worlds. And I know I'm not the only one out there who's going through this, who can attest to that feeling that they have too much going on. And so what do you do about that? Well, what I will share with you is that what I told myself last night is you're going to just focus on one thing at a time. Because the more I kept sitting there thinking about how I was going to get all of this done, suddenly I feel like I'm trying to solve all of the problems at once. and you can't actually do anything from that place. Because I think it's the most intuitive thing is you just try to think, okay, how am I going to do it all? And I kept thinking, I don't have the energy to do it all. But then once I broke through that piece of it, I realized, okay, I just need to solve one problem at a time. So if I've got a meeting tomorrow, what needs to be done before that meeting? Okay, that's actually an email that I can write before I go to bed and then just schedule to send it. Okay, I can do that. Okay, and then I've got this big project coming up this week that I just need to go through real quick, edit it, see if I have some questions, prepare for this phone call. Okay, great. I can do that too. And I thought to myself, if I can get those two things done before I go to bed, then I have a huge chunk of mental work done for tomorrow, problems I don't have to solve tomorrow, that's going to free up a ton of time. So it's weird how that happens, actually, how 30 minutes of work the day before that I can just concentrate on those pieces could free up hours the next day. And this was even true of other things too, because one thing I did not get done this weekend was just the normal kind of deep cleaning around the house that I like to do. And so that's another thing on my mind right now is like, when am I going to take care of my house? Well, the first thing, again, this comes, and I haven't said the words knowing your limitations, but all of these things are knowing your limitations. I literally had to tell myself multiple times this weekend, that task, like mopping the floors, for example, is not a priority right now. It is a priority to me. I really like to have clean floors, but whether they get cleaned this weekend or cleaned on Tuesday or Wednesday, it is not a big deal. It is not something that another week from now I'm even going to think about, like, oh, remember when the floors went an extra few days without being mopped, right? Like, that's not going to happen. So I have to have that perspective. And I think that's a good thing for us all to remember is like, what really matters right now? Where does my energy really need to be going? And how is that serving me? And how is it going to keep serving me? Because when you've got a lot you need to get done, the last thing that you need to do is end up spinning out by trying to take on so much at once, things that don't really matter. And I swear, you guys, the reason that I feel like what's funny is that I looked it up. I've actually never done a podcast episode on specifically knowing your limitations. But I've talked about this same concept in so many different ways over the past 2 years when it comes to, one, being a way more easy on yourself, not feeling like it's all on you to figure everything out all the time. And two, understanding that if you break it down into smaller pieces, that is always going to be key for the long run. So I know these are familiar concepts, but I love this way of looking at it as far as knowing what your limitations are. Because like I mentioned in the beginning of today's episode, we live in a society where what is satisfactory is you being pushed beyond your limits. If you aren't giving 110%, there is this idea that like what you're giving is just not acceptable at all. If you can only give 60% or 70%, there's almost this idea that that is shameful. But I want to be one of many voices right now in our world that's saying we have to change that. That is absolutely not true. A really good example of this is in friendships, right? If you are running at your full capacity in your life, you're barely remembering the appointments that you have going on. You're barely making it so that you remember to pack your lunch before you go to work. Then is it understandable that when your friend sends you a text that you don't get back to them right away? I think it is. In fact, I say that because I know it is. If a friend texts me when I'm in the middle of shooting a wedding or even preparing for the wedding, they're probably not going to hear back from me for at least a couple days because when I get back from the wedding, I have to rebound from all of that, take care of my life, do all of this stuff that I'm juggling. And even though I love my friends and I want to respond back to them, sometimes I just literally don't have the bandwidth. And I don't know if you share that same thing where sometimes you will think about your friends so much more than you even reach out to them, which is kind of sad, to be honest, right? But it's also a reality of the world that we're living in right now. We have our people that is easy to talk with and to get on and off the phone with, or to shoot quick text messages to. And most of these people know also that, like, if we go quiet for a little bit, it's not personal. It's literally I'm at my maxed capacity right now. And so I love you and I will get back to you when I can. And for me, I've been really lucky to have had that as a tenet in a lot of my friendships. And I tend to stay close friends with people who really understand that about me, who aren't going to guilt me if they don't hear from me for a little while. And one thing that I appreciate about all of my friendships that I have is that there's always this element of like, we'll pick right back up where we left off. Even if we haven't seen each other for years at a time, it's like we just snap right back into things. We can pick right back up where we left off. And so that's something that I know I need. And that's me knowing myself and being honest with myself. And to be frank, I really believe that one of the best things we can do in our life is to know ourselves and act in accordance with what we know to be true about ourselves. Because where many of us get mixed up is by trying to pretend to be something that we're not. And this is a really tough conversation to have for so many of us, because I don't think any of us mean to move through life in a way that's not authentic to us. I think that most of the time that stuff happens really sneakily or by accident or because it has to happen. And a really good example of this is with our jobs, right? Like sometimes we end up in a career or in a job that we didn't necessarily mean to get into. Actually, photography for me is a really good example of that. I never, ever dreamt of being a photographer or even a wedding photographer. My degree's in theater though. And then once life kind of just put this opportunity to become a wedding photographer in front of me. And I noticed how much I loved it, how many similarities there was to what I was really good and trained at doing in theater, directing, helping people be who they really are, to feel comfortable in front of a camera. There's a lot of similarities between that and stage management with weddings, where it's like, this is how the show needs to go. Also, like, the show must go on. And so once I fell into that, I loved that piece of it. I loved working with new couples. I loved being creative with the camera. I loved all of it. And so I kind of fell into it. And then, staying with it was as much as I loved it, it was also the right financial decision, because there's a lot of more money to be made in weddings that could actually help me do this more full time. So this happened, and at first it was just kind of out of need and also what I loved and all of these things. Well, then life happens, and, I fell in love with somebody, and then we moved into a house, and then the pandemic happened, and I've gotten older, and years have gone by, and now I'm realizing, okay, I'm ready for a little bit of a quieter life. I'm a lot more introverted. Or maybe I'm the same amount of introverted, but I've realized I use all of my social bandwidth. Like, I use 100% of my social bandwidth doing my job. So when the weekend comes, like, I usually don't want to go over to my parents' house and talk, or I don't want to hop on a phone call with a friend, or meet somebody to play tennis, or go to a party, or anything like that, because I am at full capacity. And I started to realize, I'm like, if I want to have more of a social bandwidth, I have to cut back on the amount of time that I'm shooting weddings. That's just something that I have to do to honor myself right now. And this is the thing that we all have to do on a regular basis, is kind of evaluate, who we are becoming, who we are now, and how it may be different than who we used to be or the life we used to have, because we are constantly changing. And I talk about this a lot in yoga. So if you have ever practiced yoga with me, I'm always talking about how today is different than it was yesterday. Yesterday, you might have been able to touch your toes, and today, maybe you can't. Maybe because you were out gardening, you kind of tweaked your back and it's just not happening. Or maybe because of how you slept. And it goes in reverse too, something that you couldn't do last month, now you're able to do it. It's the same thing with who we are in our lives, right? Sometimes in our lives, we're going to have more social bandwidth. Sometimes we're going to have more physical bandwidth. Sometimes we're going to be ready to go for different things. There's so many factors, right? The amount of stress we have going on in our life, the amount of work obligations, the amount of responsibility we're taking on, the amount of anxiety that we're dealing with, the amount of depression that we have, the way our hormones are working. I mean, there's so many reasons why we are the way we are from moment to moment, from day to day. And some of these limitations that we maybe need to start honoring in ourselves, or these changes that we can start to make, these are like big scale stuff. This is okay, it's time to shift my career kind of stuff. Or it's time to change my relationships because I am feeling like my boundaries are constantly being crossed and it just doesn't work for me anymore. It could also be the smaller scale things, the stuff that I've kind of been talking about, like the everyday little things. Okay, I've reached my energetic bandwidth for the week. I do not have time nor is it a priority to mop right now. That's an example that doesn't have to be an every week thing, right? Like if you're normally do have the energy to do your laundry, to do your mopping, to do those kind of things, then when it doesn't happen one time, does it need to be the end of the world? No, you've hit your bandwidth, things get rearranged, you move on. You take care of yourself. You honor your limits. So instead of pushing yourself and forcing yourself as though the world's going to end if you don't do this, you change things. Now, when it starts to become bigger kind of stuff is when week after week after week, you're hitting the same limitation and you are not able to move forward. And the only way you can do that is to push through it. And I've been here a lot in my life because, some of us are perfectionistic and we are take the responsibility on ourselves. Some of us are oldest children. It's just a joke. There are plenty of people of all birth orders who feel the same way, where for whatever reason, you just put all the responsibility on your own back and there's just nothing that's going to stop you because you feel as though you have to. And a while back, actually, I recorded this podcast on one way to look at self-care is by swapping out I have to with I want to. So when you approach your closet, I have to reorganize this closet because I'm a perfectionist and I told myself I was going to do this and I have to have everything perfect. Is that going to really be a self-care practice? Am I going to be leaving that interaction or that activity feeling like I did something good for myself? No, probably not. But when I approached my own closet this week from a place of like, I want to free up some space in here. I want to go through my clothing. I want to create space for new clothes to come in, for new things to come in, especially this Taurus new moon, right? This is a time to focus on like our possessions and the things we have. If you want more, this is a great way to cultivate that. And if you want to do it, and who really wants to clean their closet? Some of us. That's just kind of funny because it's true, but it's also like, I'm not saying this is the most fun thing to ever do. I'm just saying there's a lot of gratification that you can get from it. But I know that's not true for all of us out there. So I'm just using these things as an example of there needs to be an element of doing the things that you want to do for yourself. And if you are throwing all of those other things on your back, this list of, 20 have-tos, I have to do the laundry and I have to pack all the lunches and I have to talk to the teachers at school and I have to get this done and I have to do these things for my partner. And then I have to take care of myself in this way and I have to do this skincare. I mean, we have so many things. In fact, maybe a great exercise would be to take a typical day or a typical week, whichever way your mind works, and start to write down, what are the things that I do each and every day or week that I want to do? And what are the things that I feel like I have to do? And then maybe you can take a look at everything and start to realize, okay, what from this list can actually just go? What am I doing going through the motions for that are things that actually don't matter? Or if these projects actually do have to happen, does it have to be me that's doing it? And, I can say as a business owner, I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are people who are managers, or even like if you're playing like the manager role of your household, you end up putting a lot on your plate because you don't have trust in the people that you work with, or you've been let down by them before, or you feel like you can't explain it sufficiently, or that you can't let go of them doing it in a different way than you would. And I will say, as a person who's been forced to let go many times in my life, and I've also benefited from letting go, that there are certain things in your life that will be just fine if somebody does it differently than you. Say, for example, if you like to make the bed a certain way, but your partner is willing to make the bed for you, is it really going to kill you just to have them make the bed their way? Now, for some of you, that might be yes. But maybe you just try it. In fact, actually, here's an example as far as knowing your limitations and letting go and letting somebody else take the lead. I did this recently and I actually think it worked out really well. So Dave and I are in the market for a new vehicle because we both have very old cars and we're not really quite sure how long that's going to last. And so we happened to have a weekend morning free where we could go and test drive vehicles. And I immediately he was like, okay, we're going to go do this. And I immediately started to freak out. I'm like, oh my gosh, are we prepared for this? Do we need to research like how to talk to car salesman people? And what are things we need to know? And what do we need to bring with us? And I started to panic a little bit. And then I said to him, I was like, I am up for going, but I also want you to know that like, I am really scared. So I think we can go, but like, are you able to be the person who does the talking? Because I am freaked out. Can you pull the reins on this? And he was like, yeah, of course. I've got this. We don't need to prepare. We're just going to test drive cars. This is part of buying a car. This is very normal. You don't need to worry. And so over the course of a little bit more back and forth, I basically realized this is not something that I need to control. This is something that I can delegate to Dave. He can own it from the beginning to the end. The only thing I told him is I said, we are not leaving with a vehicle. I just want to make that very clear right now. We are not leaving with a vehicle. Okay. And he agreed. And so we went and we found the car we were looking for and we got tons of information and we had a great time test driving. And I didn't feel like I had to be on, and yet I still was able to feel like I could show up for the conversation, and it went great. And that is because in that moment, I was able to honor what I was capable of. And I tell you what, Felicia 2 years ago would have been a total control freak over that. I would have taken over the entire interaction, even though I would have felt like I'm scared. I don't want to be the one to do this. I don't know how to do this. I would really appreciate help with this. I still would have put it on myself. And I've learned to be more vocal about those limitations. And there are still some times when, a person's got to do what they got to do. You're going to have to show up and do things that you don't necessarily want to do, or things that you don't feel totally capable of doing. But I will say that in general, when you slow down and you live your life with intention and awareness, that suddenly you become a much better advocate for yourself, because you can then start to reschedule things that really don't fit in, or change things that are really not working for you. And you can somehow create the exact energy and bandwidth that you need so that you are as capable as possible. And you know what? When you have to do things that you're just running at half full, you give yourself grace, because it is not the end of the world. We are all doing the absolute best that we can. And I really believe the most important thing we can do is to be honest with ourselves, honest with others, and gentle with ourselves and gentle with others. Because if we can do those things, if those become the main priority, then a lot of other things fall into place, which is what we really want, right? Like, if you're really relating to this and you're like, this is just so me, like maybe you're relating to either being kind of type A or feeling that control kind of vibe, or just taking on a lot more than you wish you had to take on, then you probably have that same intention, which is just, I want everything to be okay. I want everything to go right. I want to help people. I want to have a life that is flowing. I want to have a lot of great things happening in my life. I want to have a lot of great relationships. Like, being this way comes from having really good intentions, from having a really beautiful heart. And so we have to honor that beautiful heart that each of us have, and honor who we are by giving yourself better protection, by setting up some boundaries, and by knowing when we're at full capacity and how long we're willing or just not willing anymore to let ourselves stay there. So, all right, you guys, that should do it for today. I would love for you to, jump in this conversation. If you are connecting and relating, you can share your thoughts on Instagram or TikTok. You can find me in both places and tag me. I would love to know what you think. But let's wrap up today's episode the way we always do, is with a card drawing. So this week we're going to use the Affirmators Love and Relationships deck, and we'll just give this a little shuffle here and see what the universe wants to contribute. Okay. Support. I look at the vast network of support in my life, and I am reminded of what a superpower it gives me. At any moment, I can call on an army of top-notch people who want the best for me, which means I'm basically invincible. Take that, loneliness. Run for the hills, boredom. I'm sorry, what did you say to me? Pervasive, all-consuming anxiety? Damn right you didn't. I love doing these card drawings because they just have sometimes this perfect way of picking the one perspective that just validates it all, right? And I feel that so much with this card. It's exactly this idea of, like, when you've hit your limit, that's when you reach out to support. Or if you can live with this idea of, like, I have support, whether it's support from your family or support from your team or support from the universe or support from your spirituality, whatever it is, the systems in your life that are filled with all of these people that are trying to help you, life becomes so much easier, especially for those of us who have trouble having faith. who are maybe a little bit more consumed with that anxiety or feeling kind of more lonely or resentful, right? Those are feelings we don't really want. So how do we actually move past that? We find a way to let go. We find a way to respect our limitations, and we find a way to have real support. All right, you guys, that will do it for today. I hope that you have a chance to check out our Patreon if you're not already. Also, we have tons of stuff available on our website if you're looking for some lunar guides, full moon, new moon guides, the monthly guide that I create each month. There's so many offerings there. And then, of course, if you just want to follow me along on TikTok, Instagram, or even Pinterest. I always create really fun graphics, or I try to create really fun graphics for the different blogs, and I put all of those on Pinterest. So if you are a Pinterest person, you want some of that self-love inspiration coming from that side, feel free to follow me on Pinterest at A Bit From Within. All right, that will do it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take good care of yourself. Honor your limitations. Be gentle with yourself. And until next time.